Welcome to the Industrial Marketing Leaders Podcast, the place that brings together experts on what's now, what's new, and what's next in marketing for industrial manufacturers. Now here's the owner of True Focus Media and your host, Jeff Long.
Welcome back to another episode of the Industrial Marketing Leader Podcast. Again, my name is Jeff Long from True Focus Media. And I'm really excited about today's podcast episode because we talk about some really unique things. For instance, we get into ideal customer profiles, why to create them, why to revisit them from time to time, and really how you can benefit from them. We kind of jokingly talk about how sometimes people look at that as like, hey, I want to get to the real fun of marketing and sales. I don't want to create customer profiles. We talk about some of the benefits of that. And then secondly, we talk about something that might be new to you called dark social. Sounds kind of mysterious, right? So we talk about what it is, how it applies to your marketing and business as a whole, and then some ways to, I don't know about get around that, but ways to look at that and be more equipped because of dark social and how that's becoming more and more of a consideration. And then lastly, we talk about how to get out of your head in regards to thought leadership so you can leverage more content marketing. Now, Kris does a great job speaking both from the CEO level all the way down through the marketing, right? So she's thinking high level, but she even talked about how she really had to learn the ins and outs of marketing so she could be a better CEO, market better, and help her marketing team be more effective. So I just wanted to give you those three highlights for you to pay attention to in this interview with Kris Harrington. But anyway, let's jump into the interview with Kris Harrington of GenAlpha. All right, well, welcome back to the podcast. I have Kris Harrington on today. And before I bring her on, let me read a little bit about her experience and expertise. Kris Harrington is the Chief Executive Officer of GenAlpha Technologies, a technology company that enables manufacturers and distributors to sell their equipment and parts online. As an advocate of manufacturing, she is a recognized thought leader in the B2B manufacturing digital transformation space, sharing her knowledge and experience through multimedia platforms, including blogs, webinars, and podcasts. Before joining GenAlpha, Kris worked in leadership roles in sales and aftermarket with Enerpac, Caterpillar, and Bucyrus International. Her career has spanned positions in the home office as well as regional assignments in Canada, Brazil, and Peru. Her responsibilities included working with internal stakeholders, dealers, and customers to deliver business results in aftermarket and original equipment sales. So Kris, thanks so much for being on the show here today.
Oh, what a wonderful welcome from you, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so glad we get to have a conversation today.
Yeah. So we're gonna talk about a couple things, some of which I have a feeling some of our audience may be new or just kind of open their eyes to. But before we get into that, before we recorded, I gave you a short list of maybe some unique topics that you could pick and so we could get to know you a little bit better. So I don't even know which one you're going to pick or what you're going to talk about here, but tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe something unique that would be on the fun side.
Yeah, something unique about me is that I love women's sports. So I was an athlete back in high school. I turned 50 this year, so I still try to be an athlete, but I am much better at watching the sports today than playing the sports. But since I did turn 50, I'm heading to the Olympics this year in Paris. So I will be watching the Olympics in person in Paris in July and August. So really rewarding for me, to kind of get something checked off my bucket list. I love women's soccer, women's basketball, tennis. Of course, I love all the gymnastics, the track and field events as well. I'm not sure how many events I'm actually going to be able to make it to, but heck, I'm going to be in France, in Paris. So, it doesn't matter what I make it to or I don't make it to. I'm going to have a wonderful time.
That's incredible. I love that. Yeah, got two daughters, so obviously, love seeing them on that side of things. And then this year got into college basketball with Caitlin Clark and all that good stuff. I spent about half my life in Iowa, even though I don't tell people this. I wasn't a Hawkeye growing up.
Oh, no.
Still root for her. It was cool to see her just blowing it up. And
Yes.
amazing. So that was super fun.
Yeah, very exciting for people who have watched women's sports for a long time, like myself. Just the excitement around the game today, and the fact that we're going to have more televised opportunities, I think is just wonderful. It's wonderful for young girls coming up. There have been so many great players, but Caitlin has certainly attracted an entire new following, and I just love that for everyone involved.
Yeah, well, it's good. I really love that you shared that about your passion, your travel. That's I'm a little jealous too, but I hope you have a lot of fun. I know you.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Kris, tell me a little bit about GenAlpha, your company, the industries you serve, and what you do.
Yeah, well, you did a great job in my bio, and I would just, add that we're a software provider, and the companies that we work with are manufacturers and distributors who want to sell and service their products online. So really what we're helping them do is traditionally, move from the traditional sales, which is selling through phone calls, in-person meetings, trade shows, emails, text messages, and things like that, and now opening up that digital commerce opportunity through an e-commerce presence, essentially. We do work with heavy-duty trucking. We work with specialty vehicle, construction, agriculture, and industrial machinery companies. And really what we're helping them do is ease the process of doing business with them, reducing friction, and opening up a new sales channel. So it's a lot of fun. It's very rewarding. It's something that's been in my blood for a very long time, as you talked about my stint in manufacturing, and I've had the opportunity to sell equipment and parts around the world myself. So this has just been a really fun extension of my career.
Yeah. Now, I've been able to kind of work with you and your company for some video projects, and have seen some of the back end with both you and your team, your software, and some of those things. And so one of the things that I was really impressed with early on, as we're kind of in pre-production for one of those videos, was your ideal customer profiles, right? So I'm always a little surprised when some industrial companies don't have that dialed in. Mm-hmm. They're kind of like, we work with any company. We sell to this. It's like, yeah, but you don't, or you can't,
Right.
So tell me a little bit, why did you create your ideal customer profiles, and how has that made your marketing more effective?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I was really reluctant at first. I first did our ICPs because we were working with a marketing agency who was going to help us improve some of our digital marketing strategy. So they put us through the exercise. I would say that we probably didn't take it as seriously as we should have or could have at the moment. We just took it as some milestone we had to get past to get to the next phase of let's start digital marketing, right? We want to see the returns. And I think that's not uncommon for a lot of organizations, similar organizations to GenAlpha, but also the manufacturing companies that we work with. Often we think that we know the customers that we're trying to attract, and everybody knows it, and it's clear for everyone. And we think we're resonating with them when we're trying to reach them through the different channels that we try. And the reality is, we started really taking our ICP seriously about 3 years ago, where we sat down as a leadership team and a marketing team and sales team and said, let's go through the 4 ideal customer profiles. Who are there? Who are they? What are their demographics? What are their pain points? What do they think about? What do they measure? What is a level of success to them when it comes to using a solution like ours? And, it created a lot of clarity because, at the end of the day, in marketing, we connect with people. And if we don't take the time to understand the people we're trying to connect with, so often we talk about putting ourselves in our customers' shoes, right? When you truly go deep into your customer profiles, you're putting yourself into your customer's shoes. You're thinking about their daily activities, what's on their mind, what keeps them up at night. And it makes you think differently about how you approach, how you solve problems for them. Because ultimately, for those of us that are out there as solution providers, we are solving problems. And we can't really narrow our messaging until we've identified the problems we're solving for these specific profiles. And, as to your clarity question and how it helps our business, it really sets a framework. So if we're doing any digital advertising, or we're going to create a blog post for the month, we talk about who is this profile, really targeted for. So then we read to ourselves, right? These are their concerns. This is the problems they're having. These are the things that we want to help them solve. These are the things we have to resonate and connect with inside our post. So, or our blog, as we're writing that. So that's what it's done. It's created this new vocabulary where very quickly, if we bring anyone like yourself who helped us with video, we can say, here are the ideal customer profiles. We're targeting these through the video, and these are the things that are important. So it sets a stage for everyone. I think it gives an understanding and a language to anybody you're working with. And it's great when you onboard new people into your company. And it doesn't matter what area. Like, we just hired a new DevOps engineer, and we're going over ideal customer profiles with him. So even when he's thinking about developing functionality for our solution, which will eventually be used by our customers, he can have a framework and an understanding for who those customers are.
Yeah, I love that. And like you said, I find it also to be true that many companies view that exercise, that process of like, all right, let's go through that so we can do the real marketing, so we can get to the fun stuff, so we can, have some metrics and analytics and results. And it is work. It is an effort to work with your team to create those, profiles. But like you said, I mean, it does give clarity. It helps your team internally when working with external providers and whatnot, so it just, to the listener here, you don't overlook the importance of those, ideal customer profiles. Revisit them. I know even for me, I revisit them. I don't have like a set like annual thing, but, I occasionally come back to them and like, okay, is this still true? How could I improve it or get to know this type of person better? And I think too, with anything focus, with focus comes clarity.
That's right.
And, again, I've seen far too many companies say they work with all these industries or all these types of buyers or users or whatever it might be for them. And it's like, yeah, but it's harder to sell that way.
That's right.
The shotgun approach. It's easier when it's more refined.
Yeah. And we have a common friend, right? Kurt Anderson, who likes to say, niche down until it hurts. And, I always understood what he meant conceptually, but when you get into the details of how are we niching down and really connecting to our audience, it takes going deeper. And we made mistakes as an organization that's been around since 2011. For the first 6 years, we called ourselves an e-commerce solution. Well, many manufacturers weren't ready for e-commerce solutions. They were ready for customer portals, dealer portals, digital enablement tools, maybe self-service options or self-service tools. But e-commerce, they had in their mind that meant Amazon, or that whatever it meant to them, it meant that they were threatening their partner channel. And they weren't ready to have that type of discussion or really engage with these types of solutions, even though these solutions remove that friction and improve the buying process. So when we started understanding that there's a different language, we had to start using that different language and narrowing and focusing and getting clarity. And then, the ICP is even that further step. So I think it's so important. And if I were to do it all over again, I would start with those things.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's great. It's interesting. I love how you're listening to industry terms, what your customers expect, all those things, right? We did a big website redesign for an industrial company, and we got pretty far down the road with their website, their menu structure, all these things, and a lot of the main items in their menu were internal verbiage that nobody else used.
Sure.
And so once I kind of was like, hey, what does this mean? They're like, oh yeah, we call it this. I'm like, well, do your customers call it that? Well, no, that's just how and I'm like, oh man, like,
yeah,
you're not reaching your customer. You're not getting any Google SEO or any of that because you're making assumptions or you're labeling it internally, but nobody knows that. So, granted, if you're Apple, Google, Amazon, you can name things and people will understand it. But, for most decent sized companies, you want to go with industry terms predetermined. So
that's right. Yeah.
Just something interesting I've seen there with kind of not listening.
Yeah.
So before we recorded, we talked about different kind of topics and concepts for this podcast here. And you mentioned something interesting that I first want you to define what it is if our listeners don't know what it is. So what is dark social? Sounds really mysterious.
Yeah. Well, it was mysterious for me for a while when I started learning the phase or hearing the phase and trying to understand what it is. But dark social is when people share through, basically they're sharing your content through private channels like messaging apps, emails, or direct messages, making it hard for marketers to track where the traffic is coming from. So it's a major way that people share links and information, but it often shows up as direct traffic in analytics, which leaves a lot of sharing activity hidden. And that's kind of why it's called dark social, because people are interacting. Usually because people are telling you. When you go to engage with people, they say, yes, I heard from so-and-so, or I saw your article, but you didn't know they saw your article because there was no like or there was no comment maybe on it, but they saw it, and it's very, very hard to see it through attribution.
Right. How did you even come to understand or how that would apply to some of the content you have?
Well, so as the CEO, for many years, again, this would be where I would say I've made some mistakes. We didn't think of ourselves so much regarding how we needed to market ourselves. So to change the way we marketed ourselves, I had to become a marketer, which means I had to understand, learn. I went to school for business and a focus on finance, right? I graduated and my first job in manufacturing was as a financial analyst before I ever sold equipment and parts. So I have a very objective mindset. I never thought I was a marketer or creative. And that's what I perceived all marketers was just that creative piece. And, that could never be me, right? So I had to start following podcasts, learning, reading books. And that's where the dark social started to become a term that I became aware of, especially as we set out with a very specific strategy back in 2019 that we were going to be really thought leaders in the space, and we were going to take the lead on educating our market on why these tools were necessary for survival in the future. If people want to thrive, they are going to need these solutions, and really the future of parts and equipment support is going to be online because we're all walking around with these devices. So we, in our effort to get very strategic about how we were going to start educating the market through this adoption of digital technologies, we set out to have blog posts, to do podcasts, to do webinars, to have a social presence, have a social page for GenAlpha Technologies, but not just GenAlpha, but myself, and to actually share posts and share information and be thoughtful about, what people would be looking at. And once we started doing all of that, we also set KPIs and measurements against our results for all of that. And that's where, we saw that our following was going up. That was a measure we could see. Sometimes we could see more hits to our website, but more often than not, we were just hearing from people that they were seeing our content, but we couldn't see anywhere in our measurement that they were seeing it. And that's when I heard somebody talking about dark social, I said, okay, that's the phenomenon that's going on. So the way that we have started to kind of exercise it in our activities and to be more intentional about leveraging dark social is to create content that can be shareable, that is easy to digest and simple to understand and easy to pass along. So, so that social side that maybe you're not seeing, but can easily be happening behind you, it is actually happening. So that's kind of what we're doing. It's still very new for me. It's even difficult for me somewhat to describe, but we're learning through it. And we know there's something out there. And if we just keep doing the good work of educating and informing, the feedback keeps coming in. We know it adds to our credibility as an organization. And those people who do business with us say it had an impact in the process.
Interesting. Yeah, and that's so good. One of the manufacturers I work with, we did this multi-year content marketing, our video value bomb strategy, right? So it's a lot of monthly video content with articles, with some other goodies in as well. And obviously we can measure YouTube views and some of the other analytics that are easy. But like you said, for instance, one example is they have a pretty robust sales team that would, send these out for, pre-sale calls, post-sale calls, or in-person meetings. And sometimes those weren't measurable because they were done through a PowerPoint presentation or, something that was kind of, in a way, offline or not, directly tied to some analytics software. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost like the analytics software you have that you can see, that's your foundation. But you also know there's this, top layer of the cake that is still good.
Yes.
Right? It's still delicious.
Yes.
It's harder to measure and some of those things.
Yeah.
What is your recommendation to companies that are maybe new to the whole concept of dark social? And, how do they better understand that? How do they work within what's going on there on the dark social side of things? Like what thoughts do you have to kind of better help, companies adjust their viewpoint or perspective on what's going on?
Yeah. The thing that I would say is for any company that is starting a new strategy and taking a thought leadership approach, I know that word can sometimes be a little daunting to people or turn people off, but really it's having intention to share good information to the industry that you serve. And when you become very intentional about that and you take a leap and you start doing podcasts and you do webinars and you post clips and you're sharing information, in the beginning, it will feel like it's not working. And that's where you have to have the patience, because dark social is likely happening, but you're not seeing it in the engagement where they might be reading all of the stuff or watching or listening, but you have no way to always know that they are doing that. Have the patience, be consistent. Consistency is the key. You have to just continually keep showing up, achieving your own goals, keep besting your own goals, and believe in the process, and you will eventually find the feedback that comes to you. Like, as you just said, I see your content. I know it's out there. I've seen it, and but Jeff, you're not always engaging with the content, right? And that's okay. You're a busy person. I have to also understand that I've put it out there. We as an organization have created something we believe in. Now we're just going to let it work for us. But sometimes you won't see the results immediately. And that's the dark social piece that, I think people give up too soon. Oh, we tried that. But because they didn't see the immediate things that you can measure right there. But wait until you have that order that comes in and you ask them, what did you ask your customers? Can you tell us a little bit about the process of deciding to go with our organization? And often we found you to be a credible source in the marketplace. And, that means everything to us.
Totally. It reminds me, just this year, I worked with a company that I came in contact with, I want to say about 8 years ago. It might have been even more. And, never talked, never did anything. And then, sometime several months ago, they reached out, engaged, we're working together. And that was an in-person situation. I think I was speaking at an event or something like that. But same thing. I mean, think about you and me, but also the listener. Like as I scroll LinkedIn or other social platforms, I might comment on some of them, but not everybody.
Sure.
But yet they're in our brain, right? And I've had that too, where a company, in a way, they kind of stalk you, they pay attention, they let you build rapport and showcase your expertise. And then at the right time, they're like, oh yeah, that Kris Harrington's been putting out some really great content. We need to reach out to her. Mm-hmm. And so it might not be a purposeful thing that they're ignoring you, kind of quote unquote, until that right time.
Yes.
But you're planting seeds of success in their mind. And so, that's hugely important. And having a library of content, I call it the snowball effect, right? It gets bigger and bigger as you create more and more. So put it on your website and LinkedIn and social and YouTube and all these places so that your chances will only increase, right? It's like, if you put it on only your website, that's great, but that's not the only place.
Yes. Yeah, I found that timing is everything, Jeff. I'm so glad that you mentioned timing because, it's so often that people do need the services that we provide. They're just not ready yet. There are so many competing projects inside businesses, and there are priorities, and there are urgency, things that urgently have to get done before they get to the next thing. So while they're going to get to you and your solution at some point, the timing isn't right now. But if you keep being consistent and they keep seeing you, when the time comes for them, you're the one that they remember. It's your organization, it's your brand that stands out. And that's true for all brands.
Exactly. And we've all had either done this ourselves or had other people do it to us. Hey, Jeff, just checking in. How's that proposal? Are you ready to move forward yet? So that's one option.
Yes.
Or, the newsletter, like what you're doing, you're giving value, so it's not this ask, hey, ready to work together? It's like, here's something that you might find of value. That's a much better stay in touch than, hey, checking in, and so it does a similar thing, but in a positive way.
Yes.
I'm curious, what types of, I know you're creating lots of content and I love that. What's either working or excites you or has gotten some good results or feedback as you're putting that out?
Yeah, I would say that the best result we've had is really from newsletters that we do. We do 2 newsletters, one to our partners, and then one to our prospects and current customers. And it always includes the latest things that we've written or podcast webinars that we've been a part of. So it's an easy way to keep connecting. And, we try to just have a once monthly touch base with our partners and our prospects through our newsletters. And really, in that, they can see everything that they may have missed if they missed the podcast or the webinar or the recent blog that went onto our website. So we find that's a great way for engagement. And it's something that we can track. Who's opening it? If they're reading it, do they click? Because we're using a CRM system to help us with that. So newsletters work, and I would say all the things that we're doing, right? The podcasts, the webinars, the blogs are important. Otherwise, you don't have anything to fill into your newsletter. So you have to be doing all of those things. The thing that I would also say that I think is really working for us as a company is our engagement with associations where our customers are, and when I say engage, I don't mean just be a member of the association. I sit on the board of some of the activities that happen at the associations that we're a part of. We frequently will speak if asked, so that, we get to engage right there. We attend conferences, typically the learning conferences. So we're right there seated side by side with our customers, understanding their pain points and thinking about how we might solve for some of those pain points in the software that we offer. But we get to be among them. We get to have conversations with them. So we're very active. And I think that's key, because presence is one thing, but then to listen to the things and be able to ask the questions directly to the audience you're trying to engage with in a business fashion is really important. So I think I would say the more we can do in that area, and that requires time and a commitment, but the more we can do in that area, the better our products and services become.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I love how much thought you're putting into content marketing, right? Through newsletters and podcasts and webinar, all of that. Because I've talked with a lot of companies who are like, Jeff, we don't have time, or how do we make the time, or what? So how do you balance that, that work with paid work, or,
Yes.
whatever, because it is a juggling act of, it's like, it's important, but yet there's so many other things to do in a business.
Yeah, it has to become a strategic goal. Yeah, because then you'll measure against it. We have specific goals on how many news articles we're going to publish to industrial, digital outlets. We have goals on how many posts we're going to put on LinkedIn. We have goals on how much traffic we want to drive to our website. We have goals on how much content we put out each month. And we have 6 imperatives that we're focused on for the year, and our marketing strategy is one of them, and we report out on it on a monthly basis. So not only am I reporting to our board, but as a team, we report and are accountable to each other. So we've made it a key strategy, and when you make it a strategy, you find a way to have the time to get the things done. And, like everything, what gets measured gets improved and gets accomplished. So if it's not a strategy, then this is where a lot of organizations miss out.
Well, last couple of things here. We talked a lot about, I love how you rephrased that dark social thing. That was fantastic. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. And then, talking about thought leadership, you mentioned that as well. A lot of times people of anywhere in the company maybe don't want to take the time. They feel maybe like an imposter, imposter syndrome, feeling like, who am I to talk about that? But I do think our industry would be better, more advanced, more diverse, all those things, if people would showcase their expertise. And so, any words of advice on how to kind of get out of your head or move through the fear or imposter syndrome as you're creating content, podcasts, webinars, newsletters? Like how do you personally do that, or even with your team, to get the content out there from a thought leadership perspective?
Oh, it's such a good question. I do know in 2019, when we set the strategy and we were going to take on some of these initiatives, I was not comfortable. I wasn't comfortable, not because I didn't think it was right for the business, but I didn't know how I was going to accomplish it. And I knew that I had to be the subject matter experts in our organization to lead it and then bring our other subject matter experts in. So you almost have to believe in the strategy and set the goal. And then by having the goal, you start taking the steps. And, you almost just have to believe in the messages that you're providing. And if you keep it authentic to who you are, it becomes easier. When that imposter syndrome hits us all, certainly did me. And it still creeps in at times. There are going to be times you're going to do things that you're not so comfortable with. But again, if I just be my authentic self, say I'm here to educate people on the things that I know and share the stories and share my experiences in a real way, it ends up typically really connecting with people. And honestly, it ends up being more rewarding for me as well. And it does get easier. So you almost have to just trust that if the organization is looking to you to be the one to do it, they're probably right. And you have to trust them that they're selecting you and go do it. And I don't know how else to say it. It was hard for me as well.
Yeah, I haven't really talked to many people that it's easy, fun, natural. Most people, it's kind of a grind. It takes a while to kind of get out of their own head and things like that. Now, there are some people that are naturally whatever, but to me, that's the rarity,
yes.
The exception. You mentioned, it is hard, like, hey, what do I talk about? Or how do I want to be a thought leader? Am I allowed to be a thought, all those things. Mm-hmm. So some simple kind of practical tips, for the listener is think about your top 10 or 20 frequently asked questions and create a short video on each topic or an article or, and that's an easy way of like, you're already getting common questions, whether it's sales or marketing or, operations, whatever that might be, you tackle that or your team, like that's kind of an easy entry to thought leadership is FAQs.
Yes.
Same thing. Like, I love that you said when you go to these conferences, like you're sitting right alongside your actual customers or your potential customers, right? And so then you can kind of speak on, hey, what did you learn in the conference? What conversations did you have that sparked some creativity? So it doesn't have to be overly complicated when thinking about content marketing and thought leadership. It can be actually, what are you thinking about?
Yeah.
What's already going through your company and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I read a great book on the FAQs. They ask you answer. Have you seen that?
Yes,
yeah, it's a Marcus Cunningham. Yeah, I reread it. Yeah, I agree with you. It's such a great point, Jeff. Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Well, hey, as we kind of land the plane here, one of the final questions I like to ask, I call tool time, and every marketer, every business person likes kind of tools to make their job easier, more effective. So is there a specific tool that you want to tell us about that your company is using from a marketing perspective or sales for that matter?
Yeah, I would say since again, CEO of the organization, I'm not the true marketer, but what continues to be valuable for me is Google Analytics. I think you're doing your organization a disservice if you're not looking at your analytics and at least understanding, is your traffic going up? Is it going down? What's happening in a given month? What was your strategy in that month? What pages are people going to? Where are they exiting? And really, your website is a very important tool for you as a business. But the analytics give you the insights that you need to go make the changes on your website. I like to say your website is a living, breathing, it is a representation of your organization. You should consider your website, especially in today's age, as a very, very important tool for you. Your website is probably doing more or less for you than your salespeople ever can. Because as we all reach for our Google and search different topics and questions. Whether or not your organization and your website comes up as a result when answering those questions is really key. And if people can find you and get the answers they need. And so much research is done online today before people ever make a purchase. So if you're missing that as a tool and doing your refresh and continually updating and making the right changes, but getting the insights from Google Analytics to help guide you on what to do, for me, those are still the critical tools as I, sit at the top of an organization.
Yeah, and I love that perspective, coming from that position. And yeah, it's like sometimes the best tools are ones that have always worked. It doesn't have to be new to be effective or the better one, right? So I really like that you reminded of us that because it's something that has been valuable for many years.
Yes.
Many years. So,
you got it.
Yeah. Well, Kris, thanks so much for being on here today, talking about customer profiles and dark social content, all the myriad of things, and I appreciate you having you being on the show here today.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Thank you, Jeff, for having me.
All right. Well, that was the interview with Kris Harrington of GenAlpha. I hope you appreciated that. I hope you came away with some key takeaways. For instance, what ideal customer profiles are and really the importance of that. I know a lot of you might have those tucked away, but it's very important to have those at the forefront of your mind, as well as your team's mind and the contractors and vendors you have, so that everybody's on the same page. And then we had an interesting conversation about dark social, what it is, how it applies to your marketing, and different ways to both look at it, be aware of it, and also take advantage of it, right? And then lastly, thought leadership. We all know the importance of content marketing, of video creation and creating articles and all those things. But how do you get out of your head to create more thought leadership content? I thought Kris had some good answers there with just getting started. And, I gave some practical tips about your FAQs and industry insights and some other ideas on thought leadership. So I would encourage you, start creating content, knowing it's not going to be perfect as you create it. What you look at a year ago, what you're doing now is going to be better, but just get started. It opens up the doors. I've seen it time and time and again with companies of all sizes, from small mom and pop shops all the way to international reputable name brands in the industrial space. They're all creating thought leadership pieces as part of their content marketing strategy. So don't get left behind. Start creating content out there, whether it's videos, podcasts, webinars, and things like that. All right, well, that was all for the Industrial Marketing Leader podcast. Hope you keep listening. Make sure to subscribe, whether it's on YouTube or your podcast player. I would appreciate a subscribe. And if you're able to, down the road, leave a review. That does help with other people being able to see it. And maybe they'll take a listen as well, get some value out of this. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you later on the next episode.